This presentation is for whānau, family, teachers and workers in the education and health sectors to raise awareness about implicit bias, what it is, how it's an unconscious action, and how it impacts whānau with neurodivergent children. Kia ora, tēnei te mihi kia koutou, ko te mihi tuatahi, ki te atua o te ao, tēnā koutou. Ko te mihi tuarua, ko ranginui ki runga, ko papatoeniki ki raro, tēnā kōrua. Ko ngā tini aitua kua haere ki te pō, haere, haere, haere atura. Ko ngā kaiako, ko ngā mātua, ko ngā tamariki, ko ngā kaimahi i te hauora me te matauranga wāhanga, tēnā koutou katoa. Ko ngā maunga, ko ngā awa, ko ngā wahi tapu o te ao, tēnā koutou katoa. Ko waiau, i te tahu o tōku mama, ko hikurangi te maunga, ko waiapu te awa, ko harauta te waka, ko Ngāti Porou te iwi, ko te whānau tipi wai me te aitanga mate o ku hapu, ko tikapa me wharepunga o ku marae, ko pōkai me matero o ku whare tipuna, ko pōhatu me ngā rongotoa o ku whare kai, ko Lee Manuera Hainga rawa ko Amaria Banks, ko Mōrehu Grace rawa ko Rawinia Whakaeke Hainga o ku tipuna, ko Charlie Hainga rawa ko Sammy Grace o ku mātua tipuna, ko Linda Grant o ku mama. I te taua tōku papa, ko Ben Nevis te maunga, ko River D te awa, ko Ngāti Koterana te iwi, ko Grant of John Dalgi tōku hapu. Ko Archibald Bradshaw Grant rawa ko Helen Kidd Law o ku mātua tipuna, ko Alan Grant tōku papa. I whānau mai au, i Rotorua, engari i tupu ake au i te Waipounamu kei Wairau. Ko tū, ko Bella, ko rātou ko Lorenzo aku tamariki. Ko tāku pōtiki he take wātanga ea. Ko Elena Grant tōku ingawa. Ko te kaupapa o tēnei whakāturanga. Kaue whakaiti te mana o ngā mātua o ngā tamariki me take wātanga. Ko ngā kaimahi i te hauora me te matauranga wāhanga, whakarongo, tautoko, awhi, whakamahi tō rātou mōhiotanga o ngā rātou tamariki. Kia ora. He tipuna hara keke, ka tai atu wete wete, he tipuna o te aroha moana e. He tipuna hara keke, ka tai atu wete wete, he tipuna o te aroha moana e. Kia ora. Hello, my name is Elena Grant. I started this presentation with a mihi, which is a greeting, and my pepeha, which is my genealogy. I spoke of the kaupapa, which is the topic, and I finished with a waiata. This was to set the modi, essence, for this presentation. I have experienced discrimination and systemic racism throughout my son's entire educational journey, and so has he. At the age of 4, my son was diagnosed with autistic spectrum disorder, ASD, global development delay, GDD, and echolalia. He's had a very restricted diet since the age of 3, which educators and early intervention teachers gave me the most grief about. I've been an advocate for him since the day of diagnosis. Some schools turned us away when we were trying to enroll, and that's illegal. We've relocated, we've tried many schools, and it's not till the school we're currently enrolled in, where we've felt no judgment and no bias, no discrimination. But I found it hard because I've suffered from anxiety due to the discrimination and bias projected towards me about my parenting. I found it hard to want to participate in any more individual education program meetings, which are IEPs. My integrity has been belittled from teachers, teacher aides, ORS teachers, and principals. At this stage in my child's journey, I'm a firm believer in takiwātanga, The Māori word for autism, it means in their own time. My child has met his development stages in his own time. He was not verbal earlier on, and I think it was the inability to communicate which caused emotional outbursts in class. His sensory issues also impacted him more when he was younger compared to now. He started to show interest in exploring new food, but at a snail's pace. Any progress, though, is good progress for me, man. Since diagnosis, it's been stressful, confusing, intimidating, but my son and I have grown more resilient. We're finally at a place where we have stability, an ORS teacher we trust, and great staff at the school. I feel it's important for workers in the health and education sectors to understand implicit bias and the damage it can bring to parents and families. It's preventable. Whānau are already living in a very stressful reality, and we can alter our practice by listening to families. So what is implicit bias? It's the unconscious attitudes or stereotypes that shape our perceptions, actions, and behaviour without even realising it. These biases often stem from societal norms, personal experiences, and cultural influences. Our life experiences can quietly influence how we see others, and that's without us even realising it. Over time, we can develop prejudice, bias, judgment towards others, and it's all unintentionally. This can be from intergenerational mindsets from our family, or the values and beliefs practiced in our homes, or values and beliefs practiced in religion, race, gender, sports groups, politics. Any community we're exposed to or involved in over a period of time can silently influence our bias. So how is implicit bias unconscious? In her article, Understanding Implicit Bias, What Educators Should Know, Cheryl Stats discusses a framework developed by Daniel Kahneman, which explains the brain's mental processing into two parts, System 1 and System 2. Stats uses this framework as a perspective on implicit bias. And I think it's a great visual representation in understanding that our brain has two ways of thinking and how unconscious bias can occur. Okay, so let's have a closer look at System 1 and System 2. System 1 can be likened to intuition. It's fast and often happens without our awareness. System 1 is used for quick decisions or when we're in familiar situations. System 2 is slower and more logical. This is where critical thinking happens, or where we're learning new information or making important decisions. So our brain, along with our experiences, is wired to influence implicit bias, so to speak. Cheryl Stats in her article states, implicit biases are unconscious and involuntarily activated as part of System 1. We're not even aware that they exist, yet they can have a tremendous impact on decision making. So with a brief understanding now of implicit bias and its indirect yet dominant influence, this presentation will now focus on challenges encountered by Māori families with neurodivergent children in the education system. So the systemic racism experienced by Māori is reflected in the following statistics. These statistics are one of the causes for implicit bias and the reason people form the wrong opinion. More than half the prison population is Māori at a staggering 54%. Māori learners experience worse outcomes than other learners on every major metric that is measured. Almost 50% of reports made to Oranga Tamariki are about tamariki and rangatahi Māori. They also make up 2/3 of those in care. Higher rates of food insecurity have also been reported in Māori and Pacifica households. Now, these statistics don't actually mean all Māori live like this. However, they do influence the professionals working within government sectors. Here is an example of how implicit bias can formulate an unconscious perspective based from experience and negative statistics. A teacher who spent 10 years working in a Decile 1 school, exposed to many disparities, moves to a new community. teaching in a Decile 5 school. The teacher unconsciously assumes that most Māori children are impacted by low socioeconomic influences based from her previous experience. Even though the environment and context have changed by living in a different community, implicit bias can still affect her expectations, interactions, and opportunities she will provide to students. Poi Poia ngā akonga kano rawaroro, a literature review on Māori education, states Māori students are often marginalised in school settings due to the power imbalance between Māori and mainstream cultural norms and practices. It is also mentioned that when Māori students also have physical and or learning disabilities, the situation is further exacerbated and problematised, which we will demonstrate on the next slide. This is an example of how implicit bias discriminated a young Māori mother with 2 neurodivergent children and 1 neurotypical child. I will read some of her lived experience from a study, Māori Women's Perspectives of Raising a Loved One Who Has Autism, Taki Wātanga. They referred me on to a healthy eating program. I am not stupid. I know that my son should eat healthy, but do you understand that my son will not eat anything unless it's crunchy? He pretty much eats Doritos or shapes, dry toast or dry cereal. He does not like lollies, cakes, biscuits, won't touch fizzy drinks. He won't touch flavoured milk or juice. He will only have water and normal milk. The program was not helpful at all. I didn't think that anything that they referred me on with was helpful, because it was general information for a general neurotypical person. I will give my oldest son with Taki Wātanga an apple and he will vomit. He will try to swallow it and then he will vomit. Do you understand that we're not lazy? I don't just sit my kids in front of a TV and feed them takeaways. When I read this mother's experience, I felt empathy, joy and sadness. Joy because I've had the exact same experience and it was a sense of comfort for me to see another parent go through that. Sadness because I know what the judgment feels like and what it can do to your self-esteem as a person, as a parent. Made to feel like you're lazy, a bad parent for giving your son chicken crimpy crackers and yogurt and potato chips in his lunch. Even after I'd explained that he only eats crunchy food, it's a sensory issue with texture, and he doesn't eat all crunchy food. He was so particular. I wasn't lazy either. I tried everything to get my child to eat. But like the mother in the example, my son too would vomit food up. It was not just the one staff member that gave me grief about my son's lunches. Staff members from most of the schools did. I kept being referred to dietitians, continence nurses, even though my other children and I had a well-balanced diet. None of the programs were helpful for us either, just like the mother in the example said. All their methods are for neurotypical people, not for a neurodivergent child. My child didn't eat junk food or lollies either. No fizzy drinks for 8 years. He eats 2 flavours of ice cream now, and for me that's a victory. Here are some statistics from a review by the public health system in New Zealand. Statistics that influence a negative stigma that Māori have unhealthy eating habits. It said that 48% of Māori are obese, that we have a high rate of diabetes with a percentage of 7% compared to the national average of 4.2%. Socioeconomic deprivation and a high availability of unhealthy foods in lower socioeconomic communities has been listed as a cause for this. Now, these statistics influence a negative stigma, but in reality, what's causing the restricted diet of our children is influence from sensory issues, which pediatrician and dietitian specialist Alyssa Morris explains in her article, The Challenges of Eating with Neurodivergent Conditions. According to Morris, children with ASD often have strong sensory preferences and aversions related to food, with hypersensitivity to texture being one of the most common. She then states that strong sensory aversions to certain foods can trigger gagging and heaving. So maybe our children have hypersensitivity to food, and that explains the crunchy preference. Is it possible the strong sensory aversions are the cause for gagging and vomiting? Yes. It's not because we're Māori, and it's not because our households have poor dieting. That is implicit bias. My own experience has left me considering how I can use my position to advocate for systemic changes and to support the success and well-being of neurodivergent tamariki in future practice. I've reflected and thought, what does it truly mean to partner with whānau in the education of their tamariki? How can I be more supportive? I think I'll add on to the phrase I used in my mihi at the beginning of this presentation. Kaua e whakaiti te mana o ngā mātua, o ngā whānau, me ngā tamariki. Whakarongo, tautoko, awhi, and whakamahi ngā mōhiotanga o ngā whānau mō ngā tamariki. Do not belittle the integrity of parents, families and children. Listen, support, embrace and use the knowledge of families for the children. Kia ora.